Wow. Back again already, huh? Can you believe it? I can. I can and I can't. And as the years passed, I'm kind of realizing that's a very normal answer. As far as this year, I've done a lot of stuff. I released a game, right? A game that I directed and made with some of my friends. I wrote that thing. I made all the music for that thing and I put that out. Maybe just for fun, I won't tell you what it is. If you already know, you already know. If you don't know, you get to have the fun of getting to figure it out. I'm putting you on a little hunt here. See if you can figure it out. See if you can find that game. I made some new friends. I got closer with some of the friends I already had, and yeah, I don't know. I had a great year. I played a lot of games. Shoot, you want to talk about those? I mean, shoot, look at that shelf back there, right? That's a lot more full than it was this time last year, right? You can check last year's video about this stuff. That shelf looks really different, right? Played a lot of games. And with your permission, maybe I would like to talk about some of them with you today. And you know what? Yeah, actually, so I guess just as that's concerned, as far as games this year is concerned, a lot of them came out this year, right? And like pretty immediately, like right off the bat, we had Elden Ring, we had Pokemon Legends Arceus. I can talk to you about that one if you want. I can talk about Pokemon. So as usual, as with last year, I'm just reading stuff that I'd written elsewhere. This in particular happens to be something I wrote on that same forum I went on that I read off of last year. Later on, we're going to be reading some stuff that I had written on backlogged.com, which is a website you can go to yourself and find my reviews there and read. Because I'm not going to read every single one. There's a couple things I wrote on that website that are just kind of flippant, little silly nothing statements. They're just kind of like single sentence jokes. I'm not going to be reading stuff like that. I'm just going to be reading the ones that I think is like worth reading. And maybe there's something to discuss there. As for now, we're still on the forums. And this is February 4th, my review of Pokemon Legends Arceus. It's not really a review. I'm just kind of talking about the Pokemon Legends Arceus. Okay. Just a few hours ago, I beat Pokemon Legends Arceus. That game is so close to being something. It feels like a couple people in Game Freak wanted to do something unique, but everyone else on the team were like, whoa, guys, let's take it back a little. We're not supposed to be making good games. Every novel innovation is either implemented poorly or otherwise stifled by the other facets of the series that seemingly refuses to budge. In every aspect of this game, this can be felt. In the gameplay, in the narrative, in the art design. The only thing that was spared was the sound department. The music consistently had me floored, and this is some of the smartest implementation of sound design I've ever seen. I wish I talked a little bit more about that. This is off script. I wish I talked a little bit more about the sound design here. I've got some thoughts about that. Anyway, the main problem with this game can be boiled down to the fact that nothing ever feels important. No action you ever do has any engaging force behind it. On one hand, this makes sense, given the new pace this game takes. Instead of needing to engage with every single Pokemon one-on-one, we can avoid any you don't care for or lob balls from a safe distance without necessarily needing to battle. At face value, this seems like Pokemon going out of its way to respect your time a little more. A creative answer to a common complaint levied against not just Pokemon, but as RPGs as a genre. What this actually results in is never having any agency about anything at all. The flow state you eventually fall into is running around the world and never particularly paying close attention to anything at all, since nothing ever really needs your attention. There's a Pokemon over there, toss a ball at it. While that Pokemon is being caught and wiggling around in the ball, you've already moved on to start collecting some natural resource, catching another Pokemon, looking around at the area for any number of other distractions. Once you initiate one kind of action, like catching a Pokemon or harvesting berries from a tree or extracting ore deposits, that action is simply happening in the world separate from you, and you're free to move on to anything else that's happening. At the end of each session, I'd be surprised by the sheer number of Pokemon I caught simply because so many of them were caught off screen and I'd totally forgotten about them. It's incredibly efficient, I can't deny that, but it sure does sap any agency any particular task might have. Surprisingly, this even extends to the game's loudest new feature, those Pokemon that actively try to harm your player character. A lot of the marketing has been on this feature, and a lot of the social media response has also been centered around it. It makes sense why this is the case. Being targeted and hunted down by an Ursaring with the intent to kill is a shockingly visceral thing to happen in a Pokemon game. That is, until it actually starts happening. This, too, turns into a completely mindless diversion that is simply one of another many things you can multitask while juggling several other things. No Pokemon ever actually poses any real threat towards your trainer. Their movements are bumbling, their AI is slow to enrage and quick to forgive, their attacks have an embarrassingly short range and will never move faster than your slowest running pace. It's a total non-issue. Within the first few hours of the game, I entirely stopped considering the aggressive overworld Pokemon as any kind of a threat, and at no point did I ever have to reconsider. I'll lob a Pokeball at an Elekid, I'll harvest some berries. Oh, let me real quick step out of the way of this charging Machamp, and actually while I'm here I should pick up that medical leak. Once again, zero agency. The single thing that does require any agency at all is the battles, and it's only because that's the only part of the game that requires you to stop running around fields for a second. Unfortunately, it's still Pokemon in the end, and there isn't a single battle that isn't even pretending to be any degree of challenging. By the end of the game, my Pokemon were nearly 15 levels underneath some of the opponents I was facing, and yet I was still one-hit KOing the majority of those I came across. Those who weren't instantly wiped out would be down within the next turn or two. For a while, the marketing was pretending like those strong style and agile style options you can use after mastering a move would play a significant strategic role, but their impact on the actual numbers they're affecting are so minimal that the course of the battle will never be determined by any particular use of them. The strong style is like a weaker but consistent critical hit, and the agile style will sometimes allow you an extra turn before the enemy can go again. Though like I said, this is Pokemon in the end, and neither of these things are especially useful when you're one-shotting your way through most battles anyway. Perhaps the most perplexing part of this is that the trainer battles in this game are a joke. The point of the narrative is that, with this game taking place so long ago, nobody is particularly familiar with or skilled at catching, raising, or training Pokemon. This means nearly all trainers have only one Pokemon, sometimes 2 or 3 if they're supposed to be a big deal. And I can't tell if this was on purpose or not, but it almost seemed like their strategies were somehow worse than the Pokemon I'd fight in the wild. I'm not sure actively making the game worse to stay consistent with the new setting was the way to go with this one. Pokemon doesn't need to go out of its way to somehow become even less engaging. I am absolutely baffled by this game. I'm not going to pretend like the sheer absent-mindedness of this game's entire being isn't perfect for just chilling and hanging out in. Whenever I played this game, I'd pop in a call with some of my friends, and it's a great game for you when you just need something to do with your hands. But as an RPG, or as an evolution of the Pokemon formula, as people are trying to tout it as, it's embarrassingly flawed. It's the best Pokemon game we've gotten since the DS, but that doesn't make it more than like a 6 out of 10. But, if nothing else, it's only February, and it already gave us the best soundtrack of the year, so at least we got that. And that's that. That's my thoughts on Pokemon Legends Arceus. So something we're going to be seeing this year, the more I write and the more that I read these, right? You may have noticed I need to do a couple jump cuts in that review. I anticipate the jump cuts becoming significantly less as we go on, because I started paying a lot of attention about the way I'm writing things, and the way I'm structuring sentences. Just generally trying to be a better writer, a more naturalistic writer. Constructing sentences that like make sense to say out loud and feel natural. That became a very important part of my writing process, making sure I eliminate lots of things that would kind of just be weird to read. Which I think is, just kind of a better way to write, at least for me. But yeah, as far as Pokemon, I wasn't especially impressed by it. I tried to do the post-game stuff I got through and did that like extra battle or whatever with that one guy. If someone cares about spoilers for this game, I wouldn't say exactly what. People were saying that battle was really hard, but again, that's exactly the battle I was talking about in this little write-up, where I was like 15 levels lower than him, and I beat him on the first try, like one-shot all of his dudes. And like people were in the call watching me do that, like this isn't me making shit up. I have people who were there who can verify this. It was shockingly easy. Like embarrassingly easy. Even for a Pokemon game, right? You think about like Red at the top of Mount Silver. It's like, man, now there's something, right? That's something. But this is like, I don't know. Just a shame, you know? It's a shame that we got so close to something. You know, that's kind of what I said at the start. Definitely feels like it's trying to be something. It just doesn't really get there. I did not play, if anyone's waiting for this, I did not play Pokemon Scarlet or Violet. I didn't want to drop 60 bones on a game I knew I shouldn't, right? I buy games I don't like all the time because I think there's interesting things to learn from them, but that's a game that I just think shouldn't be getting money, you know? There's a difference there. There's a difference between bad and not deserving money. So, I mean, obviously, you know, if we're comparing Pokemon Legends Arceus to that, obviously Arceus is like significantly better. But oops. Still, better doesn't always mean good, you know? Better doesn't always mean good. Anyway, as that was February 4th, we're going to be jumping ahead here to March 25th, which some of you might recognize this date. It's about Kirby and the Forgotten Land, right? So yeah, like I said, the beginning of this year was pretty stacked, especially kind of that February, March area. Just kind of a lot of stuff coming out. So I may as well go ahead and get into this here. March 25th, Kirby and the Forgotten Land. Well, the time has finally come. Kirby and the Forgotten Land is out, a copy has arrived at my door, the cartridge is in my Nintendo Switch, and I've played about an hour. I've heard some people online saying things like, it's too easy. Well, it may be true that the game is easy. For me, the question is where too easy comes from. I think what might be happening, which happens often, is people conflating simple with easy and easy with lazy. It likely doesn't help that this is coming out while people are still actively playing Elden Ring. Well, I'm here to tell you now that Kirby and the Forgotten Land is, yes, easy, but more than that, it's generously thoughtful and deliciously engaging. Yesterday, an interview between 4 of Kirby and the Forgotten Land's lead developers was released, notably mentioning something they called fuzzy landing. While I was reading the interview, I couldn't help but wonder what the point was. 3D platformers have existed for nearly 30 years now, that's longer than I've been alive, and some of these have been heralded as some of the best games of all time. To potentially muddy down a genre characterized most of the time by its tight, responsive movement with a distant cousin of a fighting game's buffered inputs seems like an odd choice when this genre has been doing fine, in fact thriving, without anything like that. Jumping forward to today, where my first 5 minutes in the game was spent having Kirby jump around the first scene without any intention of progressing at all, this game feels good. Super Mario 64's Shigeru Miyamoto famously had Mario's full moveset prototyped to be fun just to maneuver, just on its own, without any obstacles. I couldn't help but feel that same dedication was shown just to Kirby's single jump. The speed, the stylized animation, and of course the pristinely polished fuzzy landing that turns the simple act of chaining jumps together into an addictive rhythm game that had me impressed from the first moment of gameplay. I feel like I sound ridiculous saying this, but it really is incredible. Tons of games have great feeling jumps, but this is the only game I've played where I simply never want to stop jumping. Not because the level demands it, but simply because it feels so good to do. On that note, the levels themselves are similarly polished. Every inch serves a discernible point and constantly encourages you to be curious and explore. Kirby and the Forgotten Land takes Kirby Dream Land 3's approach to progress, where the only goal is to simply work through the stage and reach the end, but there are also miniature objectives to engage with along the way. That's right. Where Kirby's Dream Land 3 only had one sub-objective per level, Kirby and the Forgotten Land has several. Sometimes they involve simply observing a pattern, sometimes they involve you engaging with a bespoke set piece in that level, sometimes they involve you going down a totally separate path from the main route and exploring delicately crafted pockets of level design. Completing these sub-objectives has you freeing imprisoned Waddle Dees, which will then populate an adorable town the Waddle Dees themselves are building. The optional content is fun, the reward is endearing, it's just gorgeous all over. This brings me back to my original point. The difficulty of this game is, of course, low. It's a Kirby game. Though it's not at all about being challenging. This is a game about using a gorgeously responsive character to comb through beautifully rendered landscapes littered with bespoke set pieces and stuffed to the brim with little crumbs of fun that always has you darting your eyes around the screen trying to detect what new mini-objective may show up where it may be hiding. The difficulty is low, but the only way to convince yourself to be bored while playing is if you refuse to engage with all the many systems it constantly implores you to be a part of. That being said, like I mentioned, I am only 1 hour into the game. If my opinion on this winds up changing, I'll be sure to report back, but as it stands, this game rules and Kirby's my best friend. Yeah, my opinion didn't wind up changing. I didn't write up anything too significant after I beat the game. I did, this forum I was talking to people, I told them when I finished the game. Didn't really have much insight after I beat it that I didn't already kind of imply here, If you've played the game, I'm sure you can already imagine how I felt about some of the other stuff in the game. It just kind of follows a very similar trajectory of just introducing cute little new, like, mini ideas. And all of them are cute, all of them are good. It's all just pretty damn good time, right? Kirby's all right. This game rules, and Kirby's my best friend, right? So that was March 25th. We now jump to April 2nd, just a few days later. And this is going to be our first piece of writing on backlogged.com. This is the first thing I ever wrote for that website. My friend Audrey decided to get me and some of my buddies on here because she'd been using that for a while, I guess. I'm just kind of looking at my tabs here, and the significant majority of these things that I've been writing wind up on Backlogged more than the forums I go on, kind of from this point forward. You'll probably be able to tell which one was posted where just by like the tone I write in. I use more conversational tone on the forum because I'm supposed to be talking with people. And then I use kind of like a more, I'm not exactly sure what to call it, a more distant voice maybe on Backlogged, because it's just kind of a piece of writing that just kind of is out there. It's not like a conversation necessarily. I will, of course, let you know when something is on Backlogged and when it's not, just, for the sake of the context there. They also tend to be much shorter, my Backlogged writing. Anyway, so my first review on Backlogged was a little indie game called Solar Danmaku, which is, I don't remember how I found it. I think it was maybe in one of those like itch bundles for like social justice and like Ukraine and Black Lives Matter and stuff. I think it was part of one of those maybe. The incredible thing about Backlogged is that it allows me to rate a game along with the review, right? So it might be in your interest to know that I rated this 1 star out of 5. And the review goes something like this. Controlling the player character with just the mouse was a fun idea that I was pleasantly surprised by. Unfortunately, the character has some kind of easing property, which means it doesn't follow your mouse one-to-one, but instead follows your mouse's input in a slower, smoother, calculated line like a Photoshop brush. You can imagine in a game like this that it would be a little frustrating, and it is. At first it was inoffensive, a pretty uninspired shmup with the absolute fewest assets needed to make a game, but by no means bad, maybe just lacking. Until I reached the second level and saw it was basically identical to the first, which is to say exactly one enemy type with exactly one bullet pattern, all bunched up at the top of the screen in the same area and just kind of sitting and waiting to be destroyed. The only difference is that in the second stage, there were more of them, which shone a gigantic light on the problem with this method. A shmup lives and dies by its bullet patterns, and most games take great care to design them to be these beautiful, thoughtful math equations that guide the player to making deliberate decisions. This game, as I mentioned, has exactly one bullet pattern, and it just copy-pastes it all over the screen. This is difficult, sure, like shmups are supposed to be, which I resent the notion of, but the notion does exist. Though it's only difficult because there's no consideration for anything. It's difficult because there's no design, no art, just a whole bunch of stuff happening all over the screen. The boss on the second stage was predictably the exact same as the boss from the first stage. Same sprite, same bullet patterns, same lack of anything to make you care. The only difference this time is that, for some reason, in my playthrough it just stopped shooting bullets at all for like maybe a minute or so, and then the game crashed. Nothing in this game has inspired me to boot back up ever again. Yeah, unfortunate about that one. I don't really understand the point of making a game like this, like making one bullet pattern and just kind of spamming it all over the screen, and then just kind of doing that over and over again for God knows how long, and then the game crashes. What's the game trying to figure out that it crashes? It's got very little to think about here. I don't know, just kind of, 1 out of 5 stars, right? Solar Danmaku. So on the exact same day, April 2nd, I guess maybe this is, I don't know if this is the exact day I joined the website, but it must have been close. I was writing stuff up. I was excited to get a voice out there, right? So this game is called Zap with 2 Z's. I think part of it's also like an itch game that I just kind of had. I'm assuming it came from one of those collections. At this point, I've bought so many of those collections and I have so many games I don't really know where they come from anymore. But anyway, April 2nd, Zap. A cute little high-score-based arena shmup. The gameplay loop itself is perfectly fine, just shoot a bunch of dudes. The presentation is clean, the player character is responsive, and the obstacles are always clear and fair. The reason it doesn't get a higher rating for me is that it is just a bit bare. There is no variation in the environment at all, you're always playing in an empty rectangle, and what variations there are of the enemies don't really make much of a meaningful difference in how they require you to engage with them. The biggest problem I have, though, is the audio mixing. This game is damn loud. Even when I had my computer's volume down to a fraction of a fraction it's normally at, the sound when you get hit is still approximately 200% louder than the rest of the game, and I'm not exaggerating. It makes the game very, very difficult to keep playing. This might have been the kind of thing I could come back to every now and then and beat my high score if the audio wasn't so violent. Solid title otherwise. Would bump up the rating a little more if there were some volume options. Yeah. Yeah, I gave that 2 stars out of 5. It's just kind of, I don't know. It's not a bad game. It's not a good game. And just kind of a very big glaring issue with the audio, right? Just kind of brings the whole thing down. It's very unfortunate. April 3rd. Okay, the next day. Next day immediately after that is my review of Moon Crystal on the Famicom, which is a Japanese exclusive game. It never left Japan. It was fan translation. I think that's a version I played. I gave this 4 stars out of 5. Let's find out why. Gorgeous little Famicom game. Okay, so when I wrote this review, there was only one other review of this game. And that person's name was Denpa Loli, which I don't remember what they said, but I mentioned them here. I mentioned them in my review because I guess we're about to see why. As Denpa Loli mentioned in a review before mine, the biggest flaw with this game is surely turning the character around, which is a shame since the actual momentum the character moves at is quite satisfying, and it feels great once you start getting into a flow with the level design. The slowness of the turn, though, and by proxy how long it takes for you to be able to attack after turning, makes navigating any zigzag-like patterns a little sticky. Aside from that, the game's level design and enemy placement is surprisingly breezy and fair, considering the other games that came out at the time. A great game to pop on and run through in an afternoon. Don't feel bad about using save states towards the final bits, though. Yeah. Just a short little thing. Moon Crystal kind of rules a little bit. I called it breezy. I think breezy is the perfect word for a game like this. It's very short. It's not that difficult. Just a good time. Just kind of chill, So next up, we have April 29th, my review of Red Death. I gave this 2 stars out of 5. I don't know why I was, I feel like for the most part on Backlogged, I just kind of wound up reviewing a bunch of like indie shmups. I don't really know why. I was playing a lot of shmups this year. But I was playing a lot of other stuff too. So I don't know why I was just singling out these guys. But anyway, April 29th, Red Death. The fact that everything is red is an interesting gimmick, but unfortunately makes it pretty annoying to play. The bullets, the backgrounds, the power-ups, and the collectibles are all the same white and red, which makes it terribly difficult to distinguish what's what once the screen starts filling up, and it fills up often. It also has a surprising amount of scripted sequences, which is to say, moments where the game stops, so some guy can start throwing out a couple lines of annoyingly tedious dialogue that sounds like if Marvel movies were a little more liberal about swearing. I wouldn't mind if the dialogue happened in between levels or happened alongside the gameplay a la Katamari Damacy, but the game halts everything so that you can mash through this stuff every single playthrough. The dialogue wasn't worth reading the first time, and it isn't worth reading the 20th time, I'm sorry. On top of all this, every single common enemy feels like it has a little more health than it should. possibly to account for how ridiculously overpowered the overload mechanic is, which is a pretty innovative take on a shmup's usual bomb mechanics. Because of this, none of the weapons really feel that great to use until they're completely powered up. So in total, we have a game that does a terrible job of visually communicating much of anything, with poorly written stop-and-go dialogue sequences that break the pacing of every playthrough, with weapons that feel bad against these damaged sponge enemies. Maybe there's a good time to be had here if you're better at discerning between the exact same shades of red and white than I am. But even if this game made sense to look at, I can't imagine anything here that would really retain my attention for very long. So that last sentence in particular, actually, I can't imagine anything here that would really retain my attention for very long. Sentences like that, frankly, I can't believe I wrote this. Right? I'm just going to be honest here. I can't believe I wrote a sentence that said would really retain my attention for very long. There's words like really and words like very I'm trying to stay away from. I'm trying to stay away from the proverbial you anytime I'm talking about myself or just anyone who happens to play the game. I don't like saying you anymore. I think that's kind of cheesy. And just don't really understand. I try to stay away from stuff like that. I try to stay away from kind of like cliched sentence structures like maybe I shouldn't give example, because I mean, I'm not trying to put down anyone's writing. Anyone who does this stuff, I'm not trying to look down on, but I don't know. And there's just a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff I'm trying to, a lot of standards I kind of keep myself to. And looking back and seeing all these little editorials I put together that are just chock full of them, it's really like bizarre to me. Looking back and being like, wow. I used to write like that. Not even that long ago. Like, we're coming up on I mean, this was, like over half of a year ago, but it's still, it's not that far. Anyway, so we're back on the forums for this one, because this isn't really a review or an editorial or anything. It's just kind of me laying out some thoughts about Outer Wilds. I had played it, you'll see, for just about 40 minutes on May 26th. So here's what I had to say about it. Last night I played 40 minutes of Outer Wilds after hearing for years that it's a must-play for reasons that I was always spared from hearing, since apparently it's important to go into that game without knowing anything. I spent 30 minutes running around reading half-decent, half-trying-too-hard-to-be endearing dialogue and absorbing some thinly veiled lore dumps, and then 10 minutes stranded on the first planet I flew to because somehow, while I wasn't looking, my spaceship just kind of left. It was a planet meteors would regularly collide with, so my assumption is that the impact of one of those sent my ship up out of the planet's gravitational pull. The only option was to wait around for my oxygen to run out or to toss myself in a black hole. Can't wait to get to a good part. And that is an ellipses, an exclamation mark, and then in parentheses a quotation mark. I'll have you know I did not go back and play more after this. I would like to someday, but, I mean, that many people can't be wrong. I'm sure you either have played Outer Wilds yourself, or you have heard someone say that you should. And all those people can't be wrong, right? Like, not that many. Like, there's times when, like, a lot of people are wrong about something, but this is, like, too many. They can't all be this wrong about something. So I'd like to go back and see what people are saying here, but I wasn't impressed by the dialogue at all. And then I was thrown into a situation that just didn't really feel like it was supposed to happen. If it was supposed to happen, it wasn't like charming or like unique at all. It was just kind of annoying. So I don't know. May 26th, Outer Wilds, spent 40 minutes. Have not since then. Have not loaded it back up. Someday I will though. Sorry. Okay. July 1st, my review of Shenmue on backlog.com. I think very distinguishedly, this is kind of where I started taking my writing seriously. This review of Shenmue. It's also around this time, I think it was in June that I started something that I called Sega Summer, where I disallowed myself to play any game that wasn't a Sega game, and that means either it's on a Sega console or it was developed by them or published by them or whatever. As long as it had something to do with Sega, that's all I was allowed to play from June to August. Well, really until September. I played it through August as well. And a lot of my new favorite games of all time, I wound up finding through that. Like that summer, I think is like the highest density of incredible games I've ever played in like that short of a time span. We'll get to some of those in a little bit. So the first review I wrote during that Sega summer is this review of Shenmue. So like I said, first time I really started taking my writing too seriously. So let's give it a shot. July 1st, Shenmue. A kitten lives in a cardboard box next to the shrine in Yamanose. One night, a speeding car takes the life of its mother. As quiet snow comes gingerly down from the sky to hug the fading warmth of the mother's body, the kitten cries. These cries score the night's wallowing blackness to an audience of one, a young schoolgirl. That schoolgirl brings the kitten to the shrine in Yamanose and houses it in a cardboard box. It stays in this box every hour of every day, calling out to any footsteps that happen to pass by. Whose footsteps they are does not matter. The kitten is cold, it's hungry, and most importantly, it's lonely in a way it has never known before. To the kitten, any company is better than no company. A young man lives in a house next to the shrine in Yamanose. One night, a cartel assassin takes the life of his father. As quiet snow comes gingerly down from the sky, pressing gently against the windows of the dojo where the young man holds his father's body, the young man makes a wordless promise to himself. He spends every hour of every day chasing that promise through the streets and buildings of many places. The young man consults strangers and acquaintances alike for countless favors. Who the favors come from does not matter, just that it brings him closer to his goal. Though just as quick as the young man approaches others for favors, he's similarly quick to leave them, if not quicker. To the young man, company would only get in the way. The schoolgirl's classmates and friends all come every day to the cardboard box next to the shrine in Yamanose. They take turns taking care for the kitten and making sure she is warm, fed, and loved. Before too long, the kitten recovers enough both physically and emotionally to start walking around outside of the box. The children provide for the kitten all the love and the care a mother would have given multiple times over. It's what the kitten needs, so that's what they do. The young man's caretakers, his best friend, and the girl who loves him constantly attempt to be a part of his life. They ask how he's doing, where he's been, what he's been up to. The young man insists on being left alone. Before too long, they grow concerned and start wondering why he's been staying out so late, if he's doing anything dangerous, offering help if he needs it. Again, the young man insists on being left alone. After enough insisting, the young man's caretakers, his best friend, and the girl who loves him decide to start keeping their distance. It's what the young man needs, so that's what they do. One day, the cardboard box vanishes from the shrine in Yamanose, and the kitten is nowhere to be found. Thanks to the kindness and the love of the schoolgirl and her friends, the kitten is fully recovered and ready to take on the world by herself. There is no doubt in my mind that the kitten will live a full and happy life. I have no worries about the kitten at all. The young man, however, I worry deeply about that young man. First piece of writing about a video game that I really tried to be something. I really tried to, it's significantly more prosaic than like anything I've done before. And it shows. This is my first piece of writing on Backlog that people really resonated with. This is the first one of mine that gained any kind of traction at all. People showed any kind of interest in. And to this day, I think it's still one of the better pieces of writing I've ever done. As far as these silly little things I write on Backlog, I still think this is one of the best ones. There's like three. There's like three in my brain that I think are like, or I guess four. I guess there's like four that I think are some of my best pieces of writing. And this is one of them. It's also the first one that I did, like I said, that I started to take more seriously. Not all of them are like this, but when I really care about a game, I put in the extra effort, right? So next, once again, staying in Sega Summer here, I played Linkle Liver Story. And actually the very first game I ever played for Sega Summer was Crusader of Senti for the Sega Genesis. I didn't write anything about that, but it is important to know that before Linko Liver Story, I played Crusader of Senti. It looks like maybe a month before. I played it towards the beginning of June. This was written on July 13th, so yeah, maybe about a month before. Keep that in mind. So, July 13th, Linko Liver Story. I'm going to list a few traits below, and I'd like you to guess what game I'm referring to. Top-down Zelda-inspired combat with absurdly small hit detection. A charge attack that sends a boomerang-like projectile forward. Moveset consisting of jumps and a dash that utilizes momentum-based drifting. Floating companion creature whose abilities change depending on equipment preferences. Linear adventure areas connected via an overworld map. Villages with talking animals. Using apples to refill health. Surprisingly convoluted story about the origin of life. Complete disregard for any sense of mechanical or narrative pacing. Can be easily completed in a few short play sessions, and it ends with a beautiful calligraphy fin. It might seem like I'm describing Linko Liver Story. That's because I am. But I'm also describing Nextech's previous game, released only a short 2 years prior, Crusader of Senti. It's almost comical how perfectly identical these two games are. Since it's impossible to divorce Linko Liver Story from the shadow of Crusader of Senti, I also regret to report that Crusader of Senti nearly does everything better. Crusader of Senti's narrative focus on prejudice and miscommunication feels a lot more inspired and poignant than Linko Liver Story's musings about the impermanence of naturalistic life. I'll give Linko Liver Story that its protagonist's controls feels more polished and refined, though its enemies are significantly more annoying and its weapon growing system does not offer nearly as many strategic or personalization opportunities as it seems to hope it does. Of course, this is all neglecting one crucial detail. In Linko Liver Story, you can Naruto run as a fox girl, so maybe it's better than Crusader of Senti after all. And maybe it is, right? As I look back on these games, I find myself having almost equal fondness for both of them. At this time of writing, I obviously preferred Crusader of Senti. But I think there's a particular charm to Linko Liver Story that, it's not obsoleted by Crusader of Senti. I'm kind of implying that it is here in this thing that I wrote up. They kind of feel different, like emotional niches. Crusader of Senti is a little bit more poignant. It's a little bit more heady. And then Linko Liver Story is just kind of, it's more of like a little silly romp, right? It gets serious every now and then, but I don't know. They can exist. They can coexist. I do believe Crusader of Senti feels better to play. I think mechanically it's a better video game. But they're even though they're like the exact same game, they're trying to do some different stuff every now and then. It's it's not quite as one-to-one as I was kind of trying to make it seem. Okay. All right. I forgot I would need to read this one out loud. So I'll just get into it. July 29th, Elemental Gimmick Gear. At the yoke of this game are some neat ideas, but unfortunately it's quite a tough egg to crack. Elemental Gimmick Gear puts all its eggs in the basket of tried and true Zelda-adjacent formulas, but doesn't seem to understand what makes those mechanics work. Enemies do too much damage, the player attacks are too small and too slow, the dungeons have no sense of continuity, and the bosses have way too much health. Along the way are capsules to help upgrade stats like attack and defense, as well as unique elemental attacks that feign the opportunity of evolving combat options. But they don't do enough to soften the boil. This entire game requires too much walking on eggshells to prevent swift and unfair game overs. Elemental Gimmick Gear does hatch a more narrative angle than Zelda games tend to push, which similarly has moments of inspiration that shine through the cracks, though by the end it's got egg on its face trying to juggle too much world-building lore and loose themes that haven't got a proper place to roost. The more the narrative incubates, the more it spoils, and it ultimately is not worth the strenuous effort of playing the game to see through to the end. This game is just a few too many eggs short of a dozen. No one seemed to like that review. I think that's hilarious. I think that's very, very fucking funny to just constantly be doing egg puns. Like, I tried to really, actually communicate things that I felt like in a meaningful way as well, just via egg puns and stuff, because the game is called EGG, right? It's Elemental Gimmick Gear. The damn thing looks like an egg, right? It's all on purpose in the game, but it like, the game doesn't really even do anything with it. I did more with the egg theming in my review than the game does in itself, right? It just kind of calls the thing an egg, and it's, you know, it's just kind of it. Yeah, people didn't seem to like that one. I think it's very funny. I think that's great. I think that's a very funny review. Okay, yeah, August 1st. So this is about one of my new favorite games of all time. It's in my top 5 now. After I played this game, I put it in my top 5 favorite games of all time. This is my August 1st editorial of Panzer Dragoon Saga. World-renowned auteurs have spent their entire careers trying to recapture even just a fraction of what it wields so confidently, finding a full foundation on which to build their own legacies even from just small pebbles chipped off of its memory. There has never been anything else quite like it. There will never be anything else quite like it. It is exactly what it wants to be. It is exactly what it needs to be. It is a towering monument to both what humanity is and what humanity is capable of. It is Panzer Dragoon Saga. And that's all that one. It's very short. Because it's kind of like, for a game like that, what even can I say, right? So much of like every significant video game that's ever come after it has some kind of trace of Panzer Dragoon Saga inside of it, right? Like every single one, right? Like the storytelling sensibilities of Yoko Taro, and like everything, every single identity aspect of like Fumito Ueda's games, all these guys that are just aping all their shit from Panzer Dragoon Saga. And this is like stuff that like people laud them for, right? They're called auteurs, right? Some of the best directors of all time. And they're just yonking stuff from Panzer Dragoon Saga, like very blatantly, right? I'm not even like trying to draw connections where there isn't any. Like, it's really obviously blatant that they're doing this. It's just no one has played this damn game, so none of them know that they're all just kind of hacks, right? No one can tell. No one has found out, which is a shame. One of my favorite games of all time. I gave it a full 5 stars. I didn't mention the stars in the previous couple reviews. I kind of forgot to. I'm pretty sure this is the only game we'll be talking about today that I gave a full 5 stars to. Yeah, unbelievable. Unbelievable game, that Panzer Dragoon Saga. So next, August 22nd, I've got this review of Three Wonders, which is, I guess, I mean, I don't know. I never really had like a lead up like that for any other game I talked about today. I'll just go into the writing, right? Why not? Incredible package of 2 awesome little games. They both wear their inspirations on their sleeve. I promised the design documents were 2 pages each, one with 2 screenshots of Ghouls and Ghosts and Gunstar heroes, the other with Gradius and R-Type, but still managed to find its own voice with something unique to say. One might look at that list of inspirations and be put off. These are all games that pose pretty significant challenge, as well as being games that are bastardized constantly. A welcome surprise was to see that, despite these being arcade games, and despite where its ideas all originated from, these 2 games are pretty breezy. The versatile player control options and upgrades make the surreal romps through fantastical locations brisk and engaging, allowing nothing to get in the way of appreciating just how deliberately and considerately the levels were designed. And like I said, just because these games draw obvious inspirations does not mean they're retreads of tired ideas. Every moment of every level and every boss had me impressed and delighted at how fresh their ideas are and how acutely they're executed. These 2 games have more than earned their spot, standing shoulder to shoulder with the giants they harken back to. Wonderful 2 games. Not sure why they called it 3 Wonders, though. There's only 2 Wonders. I did notice some weird thing in this game tacked on, like gum stuck to the bottom of a shoe. Not really sure what it was. It certainly wasn't wonderful, I'll tell you that. 2 Wonders. So, yeah, 2 Wonders. I gave the star 4.5 stars out of 5. Lost half of a star for that third thing they're calling a wonder. If it was just those other 2 games on their own, it would have been full 5. Great games. Very, very good. Yeah, I don't know. Not much else to say besides that. Do have something to say here, though. So September 3rd, Psycho Summer is officially over, and one of the first games I picked up is that, since it only came out a few days prior to my writing this, was, at least in English, was Shin-chan, Me and the Professor on Summer Vacation, The Endless 7-Day Journey. Which, I mean, you can look back there. I've got Boku no Natsuyasumi on my shelf. That's a game I care about a lot. And you can see, okay, so actually, that game has actually risen in prominence very recently because a certain Action Button Reviews made a 6-hour video on it. Now everyone acts like they've been loving that game for their whole lives. You can go back and watch my video about this, of my reading my reviews of last year. That game was also on that shelf. It's always been there. This review of Shin-chan came out, like a month before the Action Button video. I'm no poser is what I'm trying to say. I'm no poser. I just like this stuff. I just like this stuff. Well, I like Boku no Natsuyasumi. I don't like Shin-chan. I should probably just read the review. You can see why I'm saying this. Anyway, September 3rd, Shin-chan. I'm just gonna call it Shin-chan. I'm not gonna say the whole title. It's really long. September 3rd. Boku no Natsuyasumi is a summer vacation. Shin-chan is a video game that is set during a summer vacation. The gentle, understated daily morning exercises of Boku Natsu are pantomimed in Shin-chan, with throaty yells and militaristic marching music. Nobody dares to speak a single authentic word to each other lest it gets in the way of whatever tired, juvenile joke Shin-chan is about to sucker them into. The player is constantly corralled down a main path so the game can continue expositing this narrative about a mad scientist and his dinosaurs, which regularly and fatally pierces through whatever atmosphere the game may have had with their garish clown music and exaggerated bombast. Experiences are objectified as things to collect, so that they may be included in the local newspaper to gain subscriptions. The wildlife is objectified as things to collect, so that they may be traded in for money with the local shop owners. The money must be collected so food can be bought to satiate Shin-chan's stamina meter. If it empties, Shin-chan faints due to hunger and is sent back to the house his family is staying at. This stamina meter turns even something as fundamental as walking into a number to manage. Everything is a data point. This is not a vacation. This is taking the beauty and joy and the little quirks of living and twisting it into a loveless economy. Sometimes, in the quiet gasp for air between micromanaging a preschooler summer vacation and the squealing displays of Saturday morning cartoonish storytelling, whispers of Millennium Kitchen's legacy can be felt in the breeze. Sometimes, walking lazily through beautifully rendered backgrounds with considerately composed perspectives feels just as comfortable and familiar as it's supposed to. This lasts until the mistake is made of interacting with the game at all by catching a bug or a fish or picking up an item, to which Shin-chan will once again holler out his raucous yops, and being shown the name of that collectible inevitably calls to mind, the girl who runs the grocery store will pay me 100 yen for 6 of these. Maybe someday Millennium Kitchen will have the opportunity to localize one of the games that doesn't feel the need to obsessively gamify itself, or subvert whatever honest sentiments they've drawn upon for the mainline Boku no Natsuyasumi titles. I also wonder how much of this obnoxiousness comes from the fact that they're working with the Shin-chan intellectual property in particular. Attack of the Friday Monsters, their previous game, had similar problems in tone but at least wasn't nearly so vapid. Maybe this is what they think Western audiences want. Looking at current review scores around the internet, maybe they're right. Personally, I'd prefer Summer Vacation over a video game set during one. And I want to touch on, so when I mentioned the review scores around the internet, when this game was released in English, people were creaming their pants over this thing, right? I was seeing so many outlets and so many like individual people unbacklogged and off of it, YouTube videos, blog posts, whatever, forum posts, everywhere. People were just saying that this is like the best thing. Finally, a Boku no Natsuyasumi game came out in English, right? Finally. I felt like an alien, right? That something was it's just so not at all what a Boku no Natsuyasumi game is. And I have to wonder, maybe these people just never played a Boku no Natsuyasumi game, or maybe they were just so elated at the idea of one coming in English that they didn't even really care that it was bad. But there definitely was some kind of like honeymoon period. It looks like now people are starting to be a little more kind of realistic, kind of approaching it more honestly. And generally it seems like the impressions are going down. People still seem to like this game generally, but it's not being lauded as like, you know, this big, this heavenly rapture as it was kind of being touted as before. So yeah, so that's another one of those ones that I really kind of put a lot of effort into. A little more prosaic. Obviously, it's not like a story the way that that Shenmue one was, but it is, you know, it's more prosaic. I'm more deliberate with my word choice, and I mean, shoot, raucous yops, I think, is the two best words I've ever put together. Like in my entire history of putting words together, I think raucous yops is the best job I've ever done. And like Shenmue, this is another review that kind of gained traction. I believe, I'm going to look at the backlog page. I'm pretty sure that my review is the most liked one. Okay, it's not anymore, but it is the second most liked review. And when I posted it, it definitely was the first one, like the most liked review. I think a lot of people felt that same way that I did, but a lot of them just kind of didn't want to be the one to say it. I don't know. I felt kind of like a figurehead, like a mouthpiece, because every single review before I posted mine on this website was like glowingly positive. And then I posted this one and it got a lot of likes. So I'm not trying to say I single-handedly changed the perspective of this game. I'm not trying to say that. But like immediately after I posted my review, a lot of people kind of started rating it lower. That's all I'm saying. Causation is not correlation, but there kind of is a correlation. That's all I'm trying to say. Anyways, we move on now from September 3rd to September 6th. We're going back to the forums now, off of Backlogged. I did post this on Backlogged and lightly edited it so that it made more sense in just kind of a standalone context. I'm not especially in love with how it reads like that. Even though it's on Backlogged, it doesn't really feel like my other backlogged writings. So I'm just going to read the one on the forums that I did first, unedited. So, you know, hopefully it just feels a little bit more natural, a little bit more authentic to my immediate impressions. So, September 6th, Koudelka. Just a few hours ago, I beat Koudelka, which was my first time playing. Gotta say, it was incredibly hard for me to put that game down. Looking around the internet, it seems like people think the RPG gameplay weighed it down compared to more typical horror games, but I thought the battles were impressively well balanced. I never died once, but most boss battles did get me close to the wire, so every victory felt satisfactorily earned. And allotting character stats proved to be meaningful and engaging, something which other games can flounder with. And for someone like me, who doesn't do especially well with scary stuff, I usually get my friends to play scary games so I can watch, Koudelka wound up being pretty perfectly tuned to my exact sensibilities of wanting that creeping, dreadful, oppressive atmosphere with some abstractly gruesome imagery, while never being anything that discouraged me from playing by being too much, a balance I only ever really found in Silent Hill games. What an incredible little thing! A horror RPG that even wimps like me can have a wonderful time with, and doesn't waste that time either, clocking in at only 13 hours in my sometimes meandering playthrough. Not to mention some of the absolute best voice acting and choreography I've seen in any game, let alone one on the original PlayStation. What a refreshing gem to have stumbled on by accident. Going in, I knew nothing, but coming out, I'm leaving with a new favorite. And yeah, Koudelka rules. Anyone who says the RPG aspects aren't very good is stupid and annoying, and they don't know what they're talking about. It's fine, you know? It's not like mind-meltingly brilliant, like some other games, like maybe, I don't know, like something else, but it's more than serviceable. It's not like bad. People are trying to call that part of the game bad. The RPG stuff is fine. Grow up, right? Grow the fuck up. That's what I'm trying. Koudelka rules. When you're older, you'll understand. Right. So I will never be able to disconnect Koudelka from Planet Laika. I played them basically at the exact same time. They're very short games. I played them one after another. And they're kind of like intrinsically linked to me. Just because of, how close together I played them. So of course the next thing I'm going to be talking about here is Planet Laika. And it's going to be the only game so far, either last year or this year, that I've written. Actually, that's not true. I wrote 2 things about Breath of Fire 3, but that was like a midway checkpoint, and then like my thoughts at the end of it. It was like my thoughts on 2 different points in the story. Planet Laika had me writing 2 different things just about when I finished the game, right? I had enough to say that I went to both Backlogged and the forum about it, and I said different things on both those platforms. So here's what I said about Planet Laika on Backlogged on September 8th. Who are you? What does it mean to be you? Is it your body, your mind, your soul? Is it your memories? Your desires? Is it your trauma? Everyone's got shit going on. So many people do so many horrible things. There's so much pain. Merry fucking Christmas. Yeah. Merry fucking Christmas. Conveniently, I'm recording this the day after Christmas, the day after Planet Laika Day. It's December 26th, as of the day I'm recording this. Yeah, Planet Laika. That's all I wrote on Backlog, just a short little thing, just kind of thematically representing the game, right? And then I hopped over to the forums and I kind of elaborated a little bit more. So yeah, also on September 8th, this is the day I literally finished Planet Laika. I wrote this on the forums instead of on Backlogged. I said, Just earlier today, I finished Planet Laika for the first time, thanks to the recent English fan translation. I'm still kind of recovering. That's a game that is not at all afraid to show and ask questions about things even games now rarely approach, unless it's a hyper-personal indie game. Stuff I thought only started being visible in games like Silent Hill 2, though Planet Laika doesn't dress anything up with nearly as much symbolism. It is forwardly and blatantly presenting the many horrible things people are capable of, as well as how many of those actions linger with and change people. And in Planet Laika's case, those changes are almost always for the worse. Sometimes it's a little too forward at the risk of being tactless, and other times a bit misguided. But for a commercialized Enix game in 1999, it is astonishingly thoughtful. I've never felt so conflicted with a game before, appreciating such unabashed honesty and intentionality while also being a bit perturbed by just how flippantly it addresses some of these things. These things being a laundry list of content and trigger warnings that, for the purposes of a post on a forum thread, would simply be easier to speak vaguely about. I've never seen a game with so much pain and so much evil, and where the point is not to revel or romanticize that pain and evil, but to confront it for what it is. It's an incredible game, and I could never recommend it to anybody in good conscience. Yeah, it is. It's one of my favorite games. And if it was anybody else's favorite game, I think I would be a little bit afraid of them, is the way I would put that game, right? It's a game. I mean, maybe you kind of get the idea by now, by my 2 writings about this. There's just kind of a lot going on, and I really, really respect it. But it's like, man, maybe there's a reason sometimes games haven't really approached many topics like what Planet Laika does. Maybe there's a reason, is all I'm trying to say, right? Maybe there's a reason. One of my favorite games, I'd be terrified of someone else who it also was their favorite game, right? That's what I'll put about that. Anyway, September 15th, we're talking about Panzer Dragoon Remake. Yay! Yay, Panzer Dragoon is so fun. I love having fun in video games. And this is what I said about Panzer Dragoon Remake on September 15th. I said, The world has developed in such a way where I'm allowed to play Panzer Dragoon running 60 frames per second at 2056 times 1440 resolution with brilliantly redone models and textures, and I couldn't ask for anything more. Well, besides being able to play the other Panzer Dragoon games like this too, of course. If you're not chill with this, you're not chill with me, and it really is just that simple. And it is just that simple. I've seen a lot of people call the Panzer Dragoon remake redundant. They've been saying it's a bad remake. I've been seeing people say that it like runs horribly and that it doesn't look good. I don't know. Maybe it didn't used to. I don't know how it was at launch. I think it came out, what, like 2 years prior to my writing this? It came out in March 2020. Yeah, so about 2 years before I wrote this. Maybe it was bad at launch. It's fine now. It rules. The remake rules. I gave it 4.5 stars out of 5. The remake rules. All right, get over yourselves. The game is great. It runs at 60 frames per second. If you truthfully prefer the first Panzer Dragoon that runs at like 10 frames per second, you're not chill with me. It really is just that simple. I don't know what to tell you. I'm sorry. First Panzer Dragoon rules, but it kind of sucks, right? We can say that. We're allowed to say that a game rules and it also sucks. That's all my favorite games are ones that rule and they also suck. So I get it, but 60 frames, right? Come on. Come on, right? Anyway, September 18th, talking about Purikura Daisakusen. Let's just get into it. It finally happened. For so long, I've been trying to find overhead shooters that I like as much as Pocky and Rocky. All this time, I've been trying games that fit broadly into this criteria, but only today did I find a game that fulfills that role about as perfectly as I could ask for, as well as providing a uniquely refreshing take on the formula. Obviously, that game is Purikura Daisakusen. Not only does it fit the surprisingly endangered category of an overhead shooter without guns, which that's hyperlinked to go to a list I've made of games like that on backlog.com. I'd encourage you to look at that. I think it's a very interesting list of games that are worth checking out. But it also takes the non-violence a step beyond not exactly killing the enemies, but magically transforming them into animals, Sonic style. And collecting those animals is what raises the score. It turns into a pretty neat juggling act where destroying the enemies is mostly an act of self-preservation, and then rushing to catch all the scampering animals before they fall off the stage is what actually counts towards the score. It's an incredibly dynamic system that made me play this game in a kind of way I've never really have before. Not to mention that all the bosses in this game so loudly and hilariously juxtapose the Pretty Cure Cardcaptor Sakura Magical Girl fantastical charm by being these huge, heavy, bulking, militarized mechanical weapons, which creates this tug-of-war in the game's tone that I found incredibly endearing. As far as the idea of a Pocky and Rocky-like goes, it even has a secondary melee attack, which feels great to use, and a dodge roll. Pocky and Rocky's dive, I've found, is one of the reasons I feel its gameplay is so much more engaging than other overhead shooters, and it provides a constant question of risk versus reward, considering how any particular enemy pattern should be handled. I've proudly declared Pocky and Rocky Reshrine as my game of the year, but it turns out I didn't need to wait nearly so long to find my fix of the gorgeously presented, hectically balanced, tonally resonant overhead shooter as I thought I did. Purikura Daisakusen has been sitting here waiting for me this whole time. Yeah, that game rules. It's an arcade game. I played it on the Sega Saturn. It just rules, you know? I've been waiting for a game as good as Pocky and Rocky. I wouldn't say it's as good, but it's like as close as I can get without being Pocky and Rocky, right? As you can see back there, I love that game, that one, and I love this buddy. You can't see, but I do have 3 copies of Pocky and Rocky Reshrine up there. One in Japanese, one in English, and one being the limited edition press release. I just think the game is awesome. I don't know. I'm sorry. Maybe you'll be hearing a little bit more about that before too terribly long here. We'll see. Not trying to say anything right now. I'm just saying maybe you'll hear a little bit more about that sometime soon. Anyway, October 2nd, MacBat 64, Journey of a Nice Chap. Going in, I want you guys to know I gave this 1.5 stars. Let's talk about why. I'm not sure if I'd like this game more or less if I didn't get all the references, because that's all the game is, just a ton of references. The PlayStation and Sega Saturn rocks N64 shit any day of the week, and that's a fucking fact. N64 sucks. N64 is the worst. Sega Saturn rules, PlayStation rules, I think the N64 is just kind of pathetic, right? All the games kind of suck a little bit. There's like 5 good ones. And it just, I don't know. Sega Saturn rules, PlayStation rules. There's been a huge resurgence in games trying to look like the N64 right now. And I have to imagine it's all being made by people who just haven't touched a game controller that isn't Nintendo's, like, ever in their entire lives. I think that's the only way you can really truly love the 64, is if you just never played anything else. That's the only way. Anyway, sorry MechBat 64. Should have been inspired by something good instead. Whoops. Sorry. October 6th, Toho Tenkusho, Hidden Star in the Four Seasons. I've never had to say that out loud before. Hidden Star in the Four Seasons. October 6th. There's some great ideas wrapped up in this one, but it feels like the least readable entry since the PC-98 games. The game's gorgeous, but too many things are too similarly colored, and there seems to be more visual fluff than normal as well. If the visibility on this entry was more clear, it might have been one of my favorites. Yeah, very short. I only brought this review up because I wanted to mention that I played every single Toho game this year. It would have been right around this time, I guess, towards like the end of September, beginning of October. I just kind of went through and played every single one. This one I thought was very interesting. I thought I had some great ideas with the seasonal, just like theming. I thought that was very unique. Of course, this game has Chiruno with a tan, which is the single best character to ever exist in any piece of media, video game or otherwise, across the entire history of human creativity. It's just the best character. And yeah, I don't know. It's this one is a weird case because all the other Tohos I was able to look at and be like, I like this one a lot, or this one I just kind of don't care much for. This is like the only one where I was like, this has the potential to be one of the best ones. But it is just like too confusing to look at, which is the only one. You think games like this would often have the trouble of being confusing to look at. Red Death, one of the early reviews I read here, was kind of just this one, right? It's kind of the only Toho that's like tough to look at, for me at least. I don't know. Bit of a shame. Would have liked that one a lot if I could just read the screen a little bit more clearly. Such a shame. Moving on, we got October 14th. This is me talking about King of Casino, which is the previous video on my channel of, the channel you're watching this on right now, is me playing this King of Casino and pretending like it's Vampire Survivors. That's a pretty funny joke. Was able to keep it up for an hour and a half for some reason. I did it though. Some of you may not have known that I actually wrote a review of it a couple months prior to playing that. So let's check it out. Far from being polished to a sheen, but that winds up actually being in the game's favor. Muddy colors on chunky pixels, groggy chiptunes with a gridded edge, and unceremonious matter-of-fact information displays coalesce into a single monotonous yet classy adaptation of classic casino gambling games. Cards are presented without any animations, and numbers go up and down in the blink of a single calculation. The uninterrupted repetition of these actions lulls into a sleepy malaise of simply going through the motions and observing which ways the numbers go. In a way, it's almost hypnotic, almost trance-like or meditative, compared to other gambling games that chase the adrenaline high of screaming celebratory noises and flashing lights shows upon hitting the jackpot on a slot machine. It's a good thing the PC Engine can't run real transactions with my actual money. Yeah, the implication is that if it could, I would be... I'd be out of a lot of money, because this game just kind of eats it up real crazy style, like very, very fast, with like no indication that things are going wrong. It just kind of slurps it up. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's chill though. I think it's all right. King Casino, I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. It's not a bad game. I liked it. So October 18th, we got Butasan Quest, which is a game I, after this review, would go on to I just translated it myself, played it in Japanese, just decided I'd translate it myself so other people could check it out, which is also similarly to what I just mentioned, available on this channel. If you just go to my channel, you can find it, Butasan Quest in English, because it's on the 68 or the X68000, which it seems like not a lot of people go out of their way to play games on that machine. So I figure I just help people out. So they don't need to play it and they don't need to read a language they don't know if they don't know it, right? Just kind of helping a couple of, like a different demographics of people I'm trying to help out here. So anyway, here's what I said. The objective of Budasan Quest is simple. Fight some little silly piggy monsters, collect the crystals, defeat the demon pig king, and listen to some hot tunes along the way, all within a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of the total playtime contemporaneous role-playing games require. Being a game that was mostly to test the X68000's music driver, Budasan Quest is more concerned with its music than its gameplay. What this results in is a shockingly tight game which can easily be completed in under an hour, poking fun at the RPG genre and stripping its conventions down to an absurdist minimum. The irreverent tone permeating every single line of dialogue, and the lack of any strategic options during random combat encounters could get tiresome in a longer game that lavished in its smarm, but everything in Budasan Quest is so lightning quick that its simplicity and playfulness remains refreshing and charming for the entire duration of the experience. The game may have just been an excuse for a couple of nerds in university to push the sound limitations of outdated hardware, but don't be fooled by its ludicrous enemy designs and knockabout anti-plot. The elegant momentum of Budasan Quest's rapid-fire design philosophy sings with the same refined sensibilities as its soundtrack. Yeah, sorry that I'm, It's frustrating, because at the start of this recording, I mentioned I'm going to be jump-cutting less during my more recent reviews, because they're better and they're easier to read, which is true. But it seems like it's not true, because I'm sorry, talking for this long is, I'm not used to it, and my throat, maybe you can tell, it doesn't sound as good as it used to. It's a little tough for me. It's a little tough to just talk for an hour and a half straight, not in any kind of conversational way, just literally saying words for an hour and a half, just rapid fire. So, any cuts going forward, I want you to assume are pretty much always based on me just needing to get a drink of water, clear my throat or something. I promise my writing is good. I promise my writing is good. Please, for the love of God, believe me. Maybe I can prove it this time here on October 26th review of In My Mind. Maybe I can prove it to you. Let's see. On paper, it's a recipe that seems like it should work well. An abstract danmaku where the bosses are emotions, and the bullet patterns reflect the feeling of experiencing that emotion. Given such an inherently unique and interesting premise, I'm sure you're already imagining all sorts of fascinating ways this idea could be developed on. It's a shame that In My Mind can't quite find an engaging angle to approach any of its components from. As a danmaku, In My Mind stumbles out the door pretty immediately. All but one of the 18 total stages share the exact same background, which would not necessarily be a problem for an obviously low-budget project like this, if not for the fact that this background constantly has haphazard particle effects whizzing by all over the screen for absolutely no reason at all. They're never thematic, they never indicate anything. It's just extra visual noise for what I can only assume must be there to help make the blank black void that is the entire game's background feel a little more dynamic than 1978's Space Invaders. In any other danmaku, this would be a death sentence. These are games where bullets fill the screen, so having clear visibility of what's safe and what's dangerous is critical during every single microsecond of play. In My Mind, however, skirts this problem entirely by not posing any particular challenge at all until about halfway through its optional second playthrough. The most difficult thing in this game is how every single bullet the bosses shoot out are only ever a single color and leave behind their own trails of identically colored superfluous particle effects, making for regular instances of not being able to tell exactly where a particular bullet is headed or even where its hitbox is hidden inside of these monochrome clouds. In this way, the extra visual noise in the background doesn't actually impact the game that much, but it's only because there's not all that much for it to impact in the first place. Not a great position to be in. In a game about internal struggles and mental turmoil, having every single boss be a breeze to get past almost makes it feel like a parody made by the kind of guy who'd say things like, "Pick yourself up by your bootstraps." The only thing that lets me know this isn't a parody of mental health issues is that this game takes itself so stone cold seriously. Every single boss has a single line of dialogue to introduce itself, posed as the kind of troublesome thoughts a person would think to themselves, then upon defeat a resolution to that thought is offered. anyone who has actually struggled with troubling or self-destructive thoughts likely chuckled at the simplicity of this, and you'd be right to. It comes across with the same tactlessness of the kind of tweets that blow up every now and then, saying things like, "You're valid and nobody can tell you otherwise, Purple Heart," which is so intangibly vague that it can't really mean anything to anyone. The sentiment is obviously coming from a place of caring and consideration, and of course there's many times where consoling someone is more important than trying to address the root of any issue at that particular moment. But this game seems to be posing these, "well, actually it's fine though" remarks, as though they are themselves capable of resolving the conflicts they're addressing. Dressing it up in prosaic one-liners does not make them more effective. All of this coalesces in the boss fights against the negative emotions prompting these thoughts, like loneliness or hopelessness. As mentioned earlier, the bullet patterns attempt to represent how it feels to deal with these thoughts. At best, they're predictably shallow, and at worst, they're completely unrelated. Confusion's bullets bounce around the screen, making for unpredictable patterns, but shame just kind of has a fairly nondescript mathematical sequence. Where my heart sank is when I saw bosses starting to copy previous patterns. The emotions trying to be represented here are all pretty distinct from each other. It's not like there's an especially compelling thematic reason for them to be recycling old patterns, and there's no excuse for some of them to just be doing regular Danmaku patterns that have nothing to do with the associated feeling. The premise of representing negative emotions as Danmaku patterns is all this game has, and it doesn't even really seem all that interested in exploring it. Ultimately, this game is trying to wield mature themes in a style of game renowned for its inspired and creative ways of treating the screen like a canvas, but unfortunately it just doesn't seem familiar or comfortable enough with either of these aspects to build anything cohesive on its framework. Which is a shame, right? I had a lot of high hopes for this game. I saw this on Steam, just kind of randomly. I was browsing, shmups and stuff. I was just looking through, and this one seemed promising to me. I was like, oh, that's cool. The bosses are feelings, and the bullet patterns are supposed to like reflect that. And then it just kind of was just a normal shmup, right? It's like, it wasn't even really that hard. There's an optional second playthrough where it gets kind of tough, but that's about it, right? Yeah, shame about that thing. Shame about that one. Anyway, October 29th, Riddle, Little Red Lie. I'll just get right into it. I just kind of can't bring myself to finish this game. I played 3 hours, about half the game's total runtime, over a month ago, and found some pretty shockingly honest themes and concepts which I was truly impressed by, but it's so dismal and cruel that thinking about picking it back up again is exhausting. It's too well written to the point that the game definitely knows it's well written, and it lavishes in itself. A poignant critique of people who think they're doing good, and people who know they're doing bad, strangely balanced by an impressively bleak worldview that seems to revel in pointing to someone new and saying, oh, and by the way, this kind of person sucks too. Feels a little like the kind of person who touts how intelligent they are by constantly talking about how awful the world is. Like, yeah, you're right, but going so far out of your way to find the flaw in everything just kind of makes me not want to talk to you, right? And shoot, I mean, I've had people like that in my life before, who their favorite thing was just to talk about how awful the world is, and they got this kind of like 400 IQ boner out of it. Like, I'm so smart for noticing how bad things are. Aren't I so smart for knowing the cruelty of the world? Right? Isn't that impressive? It's like, no, right? We all see it. We all know. It's just we choose not to address it all the time as our only character trait because there's other things to be thinking about sometimes, you know? It's like, I don't know. It's exhausting. It's exhausting being around someone like that who just thinks it's so fun to point out how awful everything is all the time, you know? It's like, that's not all there is. You know, there's good out there. There is. Coming up on the end of this here. November 1st, my review of Nier Automata, which some of you might know used to be one of my top 5 favorite games of all time. Notably, on this review I gave it on November 1st, it is 3.5 stars. So let's find out why. There was a time in my life when I touted this as one of my top 5 favorite games of all time. My reasoning was this. Yeah, the combat kind of sucks. All the characters are totally flat. The character designs are shameless in a way that isn't cool. But the music is incredible, and it makes me think about some really fascinating stuff. It never really develops those ideas in the game itself, but I like what it makes me think about removed from the playing experience. Nearly 3 years later, the effect of this game is wearing off. I've played more games and lived through more experiences, and I'm realizing, oh, that's actually not that great. Yeah, it's not that great. I don't know. It's I still cherish my time with it. I respect what that game did for me in the time that it did. I think it kind of just came into my life at the perfect time to be like the most effective against me it could have been. But yeah, now that it's, the effect's kind of worn off, and it's like, I don't know, I like it. I like the game. It's not like a top 5 of all time, though. I don't know. 3.5 stars, right? That's what I gave it. And now, November 5th, somehow the last one. I guess for like 2 months now, I haven't really written much. Or no, I did. I have been writing stuff. But just, like I said, those little like one-line things that I'm not really choosing to say here. Because they're just, I don't know, not worth discussing, really. You can check out those on your own time if you'd like, on my backlogged page, I guess. But I'm not going to say them here. It's just not really worth saying. So for our purposes, this is the last one of 2022. I wrote it on November 5th, and it's about the game Unpacking. I gave it 4.5 stars out of 5. The bandwagon of games being made with the express purpose of calling themselves wholesome is torpedoing forward at mind-melting speeds and only continues to gain traction. By now, whatever authentic sentiment that used to drive this movement has since been appropriated into a manufactured aesthetic to serve anyone who wants a gif of their game to blow up on Twitter. What this means for me is that I nearly passed up an immaculate game because of my growing cynicism and jadedness. Make no mistake about it, Unpacking truly is the superbly unique game everyone is making it out to be. Anyone else can tell you about the inspired marriage of puzzle game and narrative, an unprecedented twist on environmental storytelling, one of the humble video gamist's favorite phrases to wield, but what struck me equally about Unpacking was its unconventional story structure. To leave things intentionally vague, it feels like the game ends about 3 separate times. This is because the game follows a clear narrative arc where things get worse, and then they get better. Normally stories end right there when things get better. We've had our hero's journey, let's wrap it up. But Unpacking keeps going. The story pushes on to explore just how much better things can continue to become. Better isn't something that happens just once. It's a continued lifetime of joy and love that rolls onward and forward, and then onward and forward still. What would normally be a footnote or an epilogue in other stories is the crux of Unpacking's heart. Why not allow me to play through my own epilogue? If I go on to live happily ever after, why not allow me to actually live through that happily ever after? Why must stories always stop there? Critically, this happily ever after on Unpacking winds up being significantly longer than any of the tribulations that had to be overcome to reach it. Nothing bad lasts forever. There's a light at the end of the tunnel, but the point is not simply to reach that light, it's to bask in it, to revel in it, sink in its comfort and its warmth, and hold on to its brace for as long as it can last. Things get better, yes, but they can also keep getting better too. Yeah, 4.5 stars for Unpacking. An excellent game. Yeah, the state of indies right now is kind of weird because there's a lot of games that are like trying to be wholesome. I think that's like a strange thing to achieve to be. I feel like it's got to come from someplace honest in order for it to like feel honest, right? It's got to be organic. It's got to come from a place of true self. And this game definitely is. Unpacking. I don't know why. I just kind of assumed it wasn't for a really long time. It was on Game Pass, so I tried it out, and it's excellent. It's a very beautiful game. Really just kind of unlike really anything else out there. It's an excellent, excellent game. And that's 2022, my friends. We've reached the end of this year again. I wonder how many times we're going to keep doing that. Hopefully a long time, you know. If it's not a long time, it's out of my hands, right? Hey, there's a lot of stuff going on right now. I'm not going to pretend like I know exactly how the future is going to go. But I can tell you that I will keep playing video games, and I will keep writing about them, and I will keep reading my writing to you every single year at the end in December. I can promise you that as long as I'm on that earth, and as long as this earth exists, I will write, I will play, I will read to you. And actually, before I go, I wanted to, you know, the shelf back here. I don't know. Has anyone been interested in like? Do you want me to do like one of those things where I give like a tour of my collection, like a collection video? I don't know how I would do that. But I've got like a weird eclectic group of stuff back there that maybe people would be interested in. Let me know if that's the case. Let me know if you want something like that. I'm not even sure how to structure it. Let me know if you have ideas on how to structure something like that too. Like one of those videos where I like just kind of go through my collection and show you what's going on. Because there's a lot of stuff back there that I think is pretty neat. Not a lot of stuff that, not everyone knows about. You can look back there and see even just immediately a couple boxes. It's like, oh, what's that, right? Let me know. Let me know if you're interested in that. Anyway, I'm going to get the freak out of here so I can play more video games, so I can then write about more video games, so that I can read more to you next year in 2023. Isn't that incredible? Isn't that amazing that another year is coming? That's so weird. I guess it always happens, though, so maybe it's not that weird at all. Yeah, maybe it's actually not that weird.